be paying attention for things like your energy. Like if I do too much protein, if it's the day before a hockey game, for example, and I just eat mostly lean protein, I feel really flat. I don't feel
Yes.
like I've got good energy. I feel kind of down in the dumps and I'm not able to push myself as much. Whereas if I have, fatty red meat the day before, I know my fat ratio is going to be higher. My protein might be a little bit lower, but I feel really, really good. I feel warm and energetic, and I can really push myself in those more intense workouts.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you'd like to support us some more, you can explore our homemade natural skincare products at purelytallow.com. Thank you so much for supporting my small business. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carnivore Revolution. Today my special guest is a returning guest. This is Casey Ruff. Casey has an incredible wellness podcast called Boundless Body. If you have never heard of it, definitely go give it a listen. Casey and his wife Bethany are just amazing people, and I'm proud to call them friends.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. It's so great to chat with you again, Serena.
So excited to have this conversation again. So it's been a while. So let's refresh the people who may have already heard your story. And for the new followers, new subscribers, let's go ahead and just go over your story and how you came to be this trainer and coach who basically just eats meat.
Sure. So growing up, I was always interested in sports, but I was kind of the chubby kid. I knew that my mom was buying Husky clothes for me, which I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew it wasn't great. And through like a few instances where I was getting bullied and things like that, I decided that I wanted to get a little bit stronger, get into something fitness related. I was the kid in middle school who bought like a really inexpensive weight set and had like taped up on my unfinished basement walls, like different workout programs and exercises and things like that. In high school, I worked at a gym. Was doing all kinds of stuff there. But my professional, what I wanted to do with myself as a career was really in architecture. So that's what I went to college for, and I was studying architecture. When I joined a local gym here, a big corporation that has gyms all over the United States. And as I was just working out there, I was watching some of the personal trainers and what they were doing with their clients and showing people how to work out, and especially what they were doing with heart rate monitors at the time, helping their clients understand how to use heart rate and heart rate monitors and that kind of thing to get better training, which is something I had been using for several years as a cyclist at that point. So I went into the manager's office and I asked him what I needed to do to become a certified personal trainer. He told me which certification to get, which I did over the course of several months. Took my test. That was in March of 2007. I've been personal training ever since. So it's been 17 years of being a personal trainer and nutrition coach. A few different kind of things led me down the path that eventually got me to, lower carbohydrate diets and eventually ketogenic diets and then carnivore diet. And one of those things was part of my career was using what we call metabolic carts, which we use to measure metabolism in certain people. Basically, we use a mask to collect respirations, your breathing. And basically, we can tell based on your breathing how many calories you're burning, whether you're resting or whether you're exercising. We can tell you exactly the amount of energy you're using or the amount of calories that you're burning. And also, if we can also measure the amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide that's exchanging in your breaths, we can tell you the amount of fat versus the amount of carbohydrate that your body is burning. So those are your two different fuel sources. And so we could tell the people who had really good, healthy metabolisms, they were burning lots of calories. If they were doing things correctly with nutrition and their workouts, they would also be burning a lot of their energy from fat, which is what most people want to do and what the body is designed to do when it's in the correct state. We also learned that people who did calorie restriction, severe dieting, they would end up tanking their metabolism and burn less calories. Basically, they're going through things again like over exercising or under eating, which is teaching their body to be more miserly with their calories, more efficient with their calories, which sounds good, but it actually means you're burning less and less calories over time. I think a lot of people in the space know the study that they did on the Biggest Loser contestants. I believe it was back in 2016, where they showed that not only did a majority of people who did the Biggest Loser contest gain a large percentage of their weight back, but they also greatly suppressed their metabolisms, their metabolic rate, and that didn't necessarily come back in a certain amount of time. I actually tested somebody who was on the show right after they got kicked off, she had amazing stories of what they put them through, like doing 1,200 calorie diets and exercising literally 6 hours a day with some of the trainers just yelling at them all the time to do more, do more, do more. And as an example, we showed that her resting metabolic rate, the number of calories she should have been burning, was about 2,000 calories in a 24-hour period. And it was about half when she got kicked off. So very detrimental to, how the body is using calories and burning fat. And so that helped us kind of understand that, just telling somebody to eat less and move more wasn't necessarily the best thing. Eventually, I found the work of Nina Teicholz, who was saying that actually fat in the diet is really good. And we found that the more fat we were giving people in the diet, the less they would be consuming carbohydrates, and they would be burning more fat. That would actually help them to burn more fat all the time, which again aligned really well with people's goals. So that was one kind of thing that kind of led me to low carbohydrate diets. Another one was the company that we were with was doing weight loss contests. And they would do a 3-month weight loss contest 2 times in a year. And as trainers, we were responsible for signing people up, getting people, into this challenge. We would pitch our services and offer discounts and things like that. The company made tons of money when they did it. And so eventually they moved from doing 2 weight loss contests that were 3 months every single year to doing 4 weight loss contests that were 2 months long, 4 times a year. And so we would have to do these contests every 3 months and recruit people to be in our group. And, we give them a big packet of information with shopping lists and the whole grains and the vegetables and all this stuff. And it was really frustrating because the compliance percentage of these contests was so poor. It was about 15% of people would finish the contest that actually started the contest. And as trainers that were responsible for the sales, every 3 months, we had to find new people to do this program, which we knew was going to fail. It was part of what we had to do. And so it was really frustrating. And one year I was working with a guy who was signed up for the contest, and he was the kind of dude that would wake up in the middle of the night and eat cereal because his sugar cravings were so bad. And I could recognize that at the time he probably didn't have enough protein and fat in the diet. And so I told him hey, at least get some protein and fat when you're eating your meals and let's see how that works. And a few days later, he came back to me and said that he'd already lost several pounds of weight and asked what keto was. And I said, well, I've heard of keto, but I don't exactly know what that is. And that was pretty much the day that, my obsession into the low carbohydrate nutrition really kicked off. It was pretty much the last time I ever listened to music in my car, and just, all the podcasts and learning about this stuff was so fascinating. This guy won the contest. He lost about 25 pounds. We got recognized as, the trainers that really helped him through that. And from there, my wife and I just decided we weren't going to do what the company wanted us to do and give them, our participants, the information that we were giving to everybody that wasn't working. We gave people different meal plans, and everybody knew if they signed up with us, they were going to do this rogue kind of different plan where we were going to take them to very low carbohydrate, and we gave them meal plans that they could, eat as much as they wanted. They could help give that to their kids or add carbohydrates that they wanted. And we had so much success with that. It was really great. And so, after being in that world for about a year or so, I learned about carnivore and carnivore diets, and I wanted to try it. So I gave myself 30 days. That was April of 2019. And I ended up feeling so good that I'm now year 5.5 on carnivore. And I just love the way I feel at age 40. I feel much better than I did 10 years ago and have really good energy and good performance. And so that's kind of an overview of how I got to this space.
Yeah. And your energy is contagious. I mean, anytime I've ever spent time with you like this, your energy is just contagious. So,
thank you.
So now let me ask you about your past eating behaviors. What was that like? Would you have identified yourself as a binge eater?
That's a great question. No, I don't think I would have identified myself as a binge eater. I think it was only after cutting out carbohydrates and then having, deviations from that I realized that I'm not the best at moderating and I need to really abstain from foods. I don't know that I could identify that early on. I will say that, with my background in cycling, with personal training, I was eating a pretty standard diet of a very high carbohydrate diet. You'd have to eat lots of carbohydrates before a ride or the night before a race or something like that. We know that we don't store very many carbohydrates. And so if you do endurance sports, if you've ever had the experience of you going, too hard for a certain amount of time, maybe it's an hour, 2 hours, and you suddenly run out of energy, you'll know what it's like to kind of hit the wall when your body runs out of the carbohydrate that it stores. And I would experience that if I didn't have, the Cytomax and goos and gels and all these products and carrying stuff with me that were, basically a ton of sugar. If you weren't always topping up with that stuff, you would end up running out. And again, that's something I experienced a lot. It was later on that we learned that again, if you fed endurance athletes less of the carbohydrates and more of the fat, they would then burn more of their fat, which meant they were burning less of the carbohydrates, which means they wouldn't as easily run out. They wouldn't hit that wall of running out of sugar because their bodies were burning the fat, and we can store so many calories from fat. It was completely a game changer. So I started to introduce things like olive oil and avocados and ate more nuts and seeds. Again, it was through the work of Nina Teicholz that I'd learned that actually saturated fat and animal products were not bad. Although, based on my Facebook timeline, I had heard of Nina Teicholz in like 2014 when I had first learned about her work, but I didn't read her book, The Big Fat Surprise, until 2016. And I reflect on that and wonder if it was just an internal resistance that I had to this information, which basically said, if this woman is right about fat, then the stuff I had been taught as a trainer was all wrong. And I think it took me a while to kind of come to terms with that. But yeah, it was really, I can't say that I was a binge eater before. I just kind of ate whatever. And when you're in that state, of course, you have to eat all the time. Like if I didn't have, granola bars or yogurt snacks or whatever between clients every few hours, I would, be very, very, very hungry. Contrast that to today where I could, walk for several hours, meet my clients, go on a bike ride, play ice hockey, whatever. I do all that fasted and it's just no problem. But yeah, it was really afterwards when I cut all the carbohydrates out of my diet and then would try to have a few bites of a pie. Or, recently I decided that I wanted to have some peanut butter with a meal that I had. And in 2 days, the jar of peanut butter was completely gone. And that's just, it sucks. I don't like that about myself. And I don't tell everybody that they need to abstain, and some people can moderate, and that's great. I love the idea. I just know for me, I can't personally do it. So
yeah, I'm the same way. I had a bout at Christmas time where I literally ate boxes of chocolate covered cherries because I allowed myself one. And so like some of us just can't do that. And I know I was poisoning myself because it was a holiday. I was treating myself because it was a holiday and making myself sick. I know all of that. But it started innocently with one meal with my family where I didn't want to have to order something special. And I wanted to just eat with my family at a restaurant and not make a big deal out of it and not make it about me. And it led me down like a 4-day path. It actually started before that, 2 days before that, because I knew it was coming. I knew that meal that I was allowing myself was coming. So it started 2 days before that. And then all the way through Christmas, it was just, so I'm the same way. I absolutely have to abstain. It's not worth it. Right?
Yeah.
Like the way you feel, even if you just, even if you can make yourself just have a little bit, the way you feel afterwards just isn't worth it.
It's tough. Yeah. And related to that, it's such a good example, the Christmas time thing. And like, you're giving yourself the gift during Christmas to feel terrible. Like it sucks. We just took a trip to go visit family in Colorado, and they don't eat the same way that we do. They're aware of certain things and they do really well with some things, but they don't eat the way that they do. And we've been questioned by them several times about, what are you doing? This isn't a good idea. You need to have vegetables and things like that. And we were going to this trip, and my wife and I talked about it before, and it's like we're going into this knowing we don't want to be the pariahs. We don't want to be the ones making off meals from everybody else, and we don't want to make it a thing. It doesn't need to be a discussion point. And so you're going into this trip knowing, okay, it's going to be a good 4 or 5 days. I'm going to feel like crap. I just am. And it's not the worst, but it's not great to feel like crap. And I know my anxiety will come back. My sleep will kind of suck. Luckily, we were able to, we lived 100% carnivore, and we grabbed some ground meat, and we were able to like grill up burger patties every night and share that with people. And it wasn't terribly disruptive to just live on eggs and burger patties. And we felt great, which was awesome. But it's tough. It's tough because you do want to think like, why can't I go off of this for a special occasion? Why can't I go off of this to eat with my family? And some people can, and it's frustrating if you can't, but I think it's good to do what you do and understand your body and yourself, and know that like, if I do, I'm going to pay the price, and whether or not that's worth it or not is everybody's, compromise they need to make.
Right. Exactly. Because that's the thing, is that, that's one of the wonderful things I think about the carnivore diet as an elimination diet, and even continuing to eliminate for 3, 4, 5 years, however long you're on the carnivore diet, is that you get to make that choice. Like if something makes you not feel good, you get to decide on a daily basis, do I want to feel good or do I want to feel like garbage tomorrow? And most of the time you're going to choose that you want to feel good, and you're going to be glad that you did. And that is not a downside of the carnivore diet. It's actually an upside. It's actually one of the benefits. It's one of the perks, is to know that you've eliminated enough things from your life that if you eat those couple of things that you want, that you're not going to feel the best tomorrow. And then you get to decide. I think that's awesome that we get to make that choice.
I agree. One of my favorite memes making fun of carnivores shows the first frame and it's like the bro that's like, yeah, carnivore. And then the bottom frame, he's like holding his back. He's like, oh, I ate a carb. My back hurts. It's like, it's so funny. And it's in a way very, very true that like,
Right.
yeah, you're making fun of us because it seems like we're really sensitive to things, but you do become very sensitive to certain things. And,
Well,
once you cut something out and bring it back in, it might affect you differently.
right. And the other side of that is the person holding his back is 90% of Americans all day, every day.
That's right.
So, like, yeah, we eat a carb, a couple of carbs, a few carbs, and don't feel the best the next day, but we feel optimal almost all the time. And
That's right.
so people want to look down on it and say, yeah, but as soon as you go off, you gain the weight back, or as soon as you go off, you won't feel well, or your arthritis will come back. Right. That's why we try not to go off.
So don't go off. I
So
love
I
it.
want to touch on a couple of things that you said before. You talked about being a kid and your mom buying Husky clothes for you. And just as a note to parents out there who don't think it's a big deal, right? That they're overweight most likely. And if they're not, but their children are, that's just such a hard place for kids to be. And I am not okaying it from the bullier side of view at all, because I think it's horrible to bully anybody for any reason ever under any circumstances. But kids are mean and kids don't know. And there are kids that are going to be mean to your sweet baby because you're not providing them with the nutrition that they need. And so just as a note on that, how hard that must have been as a child to be made fun of. And again, I am not okaying it. Your other kids shouldn't get to bully a kid just because they're overweight. But the bottom line is kids will. And so I think if for no other reason, although there are many other reasons to keep our kids at a healthy weight, I think it's so important. Now they go through spurts where, through puberty and things like that, where kids tend to gain a little bit of weight almost no matter what you do. But it's our responsibility as parents to make sure that they're healthy and to buy the foods that are going to make them feel good and have those foods in the house. What they do when they're out is going to be on them, even as a teenager when they make poor choices. But as parents, it's our responsibility to set a good example.
I agree. I'm not a parent, and so
Mhm.
I don't understand how difficult it is. I will say this trip that we took recently to visit family, there were several toddlers in the house, and observing them and what they were eating. I mean, like one of the kids, as soon as he woke up in the morning, was already eating Rice Krispie treats. They'd made a
Mhm.
batch of Rice Krispie treats, and that was like the first meal of the day. And like to observe the cookies and crackers and juice boxes, and just like it's constant nonstop. It wasn't, there was some fruits, there wasn't like vegetables, it was like a lot of just snacks, and like stopping the kids from playing outside because they needed to come in and have a snack kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
don't know, again, like I'm not a parent, so I can't
Right.
judge how difficult it is. I just think we as a society, we could probably do a much better job of like, yeah, maybe you can have some fruit, but let's finish your eggs first, or let's have a few pieces of bacon, or let's get some, some kind of protein in you. And the food quality when I was growing up, and probably when you were growing up, was not the best, and it's a lot worse now.
Yeah.
And I understand the challenge, but yeah, I think we could do a better job of at least like, trying to limit snacks and desserts. Like desserts all day is what I observed. And
Yeah.
like
Right.
maybe one sweet thing after a meal. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
I wish we could do better with that.
Yeah. Our church does donuts and soda and stuff. They also have coffees with all the sugary creamers and things like that. And I have seen children come in, and these are already children that do not appear healthy, if you know what I mean. They come in, they get a Dr. Pepper, they go and they get a donut, and they eat that before the service starts. And
Oh
then
my
when that
goodness.
service ends, they go back up and get like another soda or another donut. And I'm not exaggerating. Or they get a candy bar. They have like, just regular candy bars there. They have started having like meat sticks and beef jerky and things like that because I asked
Good.
them if they could have some
Oh wow.
protein. So they do cheese sticks and things like that now. And I'm grateful they're not like the best quality beef jerky and stuff like that, but still it's protein and people love it. Like you see people walking away with 2 bags of beef jerky, people love it. But the worst part for me is watching those children go in and get that soda at 8:30 in the morning these are little kids with a full donut. And then there's candy on the welcome desk as you come in, and the kids are,
Oh my
picking up a
goodness.
handful of candy as they walk by, and even the adults that come in and grab a handful of mints on the way to their seat. Like that's not because they have bad breath. That's because they see the bowl of mints. the light goes off in their head and they have to have those
Yeah.
mints. And people think that it's because they think they have bad breath, but that's not why. And
Yeah.
so, all of those things are just heartbreaking that it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
There's candy in a bowl on everybody's desks at work. And all those things are just so hard for people to get away from. And I understand that because it's an addiction. Even if you don't
Yep.
think you're addicted to sugar, you are, because
Yeah.
it's in everything. And then I wanted to talk about Nina Schultz, because you've mentioned her a couple of times. Nina Schultz is amazing. Her book is called The Big Fat Surprise. If you guys have not read that yet, don't walk, run, get that book. It should be required reading for every household in America. I've listened to it on Audible 6 times. And every time I listen to it, I gasp or I cringe about something I didn't catch the first 5 times that I listened to it. So I recently did order, I kept saying for a year and a half, I'm going to order the paperback too. I'm going to order the paperback. And I do intend someday soon to sit down with the audiobook. I'm just not like, I just don't read very well. I have a book. I like to listen to it. So my goal is to go through all of the bookmarks that I have made in my Audible and go back and highlight them in the book, because I would like to be able to reference them. Like when I want to tell somebody something, I want to be able to see it in black and white, or be able to give this book to somebody with the things that I think are important already highlighted. So I think that should be required reading. It changed my life. I mean, that book is like Ben Bickman's Why We Get Sick, though, and Sally Norton's Toxic Superfoods. Those are the 3 books I think should be required reading for every family in America.
I love it. Yeah, I absolutely love it. I couldn't agree more. I've, like you, listened 6 or 7 times. I've read the book a few times all the way through. Mm-hmm. I'm astounded every time, same as you, that like you think you'd absorb everything, but every time I'd like learn something new. In fact, this summer I'm teaching a seminar series about nutrition in my neighborhood, where weekly we go through a different like curriculum, and I've got like outlines and references and things like that. It's something I did several years ago. So it's interesting to kind of go back and like have my content from before and see how things have changed and what we've learned since then, and update everything. But even this week, the whole topic was about cholesterol and his preparation for, that conversation. I pulled up one of Nina Teichel's chapters that talked about, women and children on low fat diets and what happens when they don't get enough cholesterol in their diet. And that was really helpful for the content that I needed for this 1.5-hour long chat about cholesterol. And like, you'd think you'd pick up on some of that, by listening to her stuff already. And I've talked to her several times and interviewed her, and like, I still learn more about her every time. Maybe I'm a slow learner, but it's so interesting. And, I've had the honor of hosting her a few times, and I've choked up twice during the introduction, introducing her, and I got to see her in person and actually like give her a big hug and talk to her. And she's just a wonderful woman, and definitely changed my life and the lives of several people that we get to work with. So I can't thank her enough. And I couldn't agree more with the other authors that you've mentioned. I've been able to meet both of them in person as well. I know you've met Sally. I've been able to meet Ben, and just wonderful people.
Yeah. Sally Norton's a rock star. Okay.
So cool.
Let's get into the nitty gritty here. Glucose and ketones. Do you think it's important for somebody on a ketogenic diet to be able to test those things?
Great question. Yes, if you have a reason to. Okay. I would want to know what the reason is if you're going to be testing. I don't think everybody needs to. I do think that some people really love the data and enjoy getting those kinds of numbers. And in that case, I think it's fine. I think it's great if you're doing any kind of self-experimentation and you want to know what's exactly going inside. I really think it's the most helpful for people that need therapeutic ketogenic nutritional interventions. This is going above and beyond certainly what like I do a low carb or ketogenic diet for. I don't have bipolar. I don't have epilepsy. I don't have, a chronic mental or physical condition that I have to be on a ketogenic diet. I just really enjoy it, and it's very convenient, and I feel great. So that's why I do it. I've never one time tested my ketones, and I can tell you, I assume I'm in ketosis most of the time, but I don't know because I never test. But that said, I think it can be helpful for people if people want the accountability, or they again are doing some self-experimentation, or again, a ketogenic diet is therapeutic for them, and thus driving the number of ketones your body is producing, driving that up would be a beneficial thing. Then I think it's a good idea that they could be testing, and several different ways to test. I think blood is still the best way that most people can be testing. But again, for most people, if you don't have a chronic condition, I would say it's probably not as relevant for you to know. I would want somebody to know how they're feeling. Are they getting to their body composition goals? I like really simple measures like, taking before and after pictures, or using, a string to measure waist circumference, if that's part of your goal to, kind of reduce. I think those are low cost methods that you can use. But yeah, if there's a reason for you to be testing, I think it's a really great thing that we have some of these tools available, and you definitely can do so.
Okay. So for women, I'm 51. So for women like my age, younger, older, I guess just women in general who have struggled with their weight, struggled with how many calories to eat, the problem becomes, okay, I'm exercising, I'm getting some walks in, maybe, you're doing some cardio, you're lifting some weights, but if you have a few pounds to lose, you automatically tend to restrict your calories, right? We want to do low calories so we can lose weight, but we need higher calories to gain muscle. So what do you usually recommend for people?
That's another really good question. We think of all types of exercise as beneficial. And I've kind of narrowed my definition of exercise down over the years. And I think there's things that you do maybe as hobbies. There's things that may look like exercise, but I don't actually consider them exercise. And then there's all of these things have different after effects. It's not like what you do today doesn't affect what you do tomorrow. So I'll give this example. Like, I don't run very often. So if you were to see me running down the street right now, it would be not a very pretty sight. Like, I'd be flailing my arms. I'm sure my form would be terrible. And when I do that, I would do that very inefficiently because it's not something I do very often. I'd be wasting a lot of energy. But if I kept doing it over and over and over and over again, running and running and running over time, my form would tighten up. I'd be more efficient running, and my body would use less energy doing that. And so you think that type of exercise is going to be beneficial because it burns more calories. But the thing is you're becoming more efficient over time. You're burning less and less and less and less calories doing it. And you're teaching yourself that you need to burn less energy all the time. So that's where we get that suppression of that kind of metabolic rate, because we're over exercising and usually under eating as well. And so there's an after effect that then burns less calories over time. And that's where people get trapped by doing things like, chronic cardio and things like that. So if weight loss is the goal, I want to look long term, long picture, long game. How can we teach your body to be burning calories kind of all the time for you, so you don't need to worry as much about like how many calories you're eating, what kinds of exercise you're doing? And so I do promote weightlifting as one of the best things that you can do. If you are challenging your muscles to the point that your body thinks that it needs to get stronger, it will go through the process of adding a bit more of that lean tissue, which then increases your metabolic rate and teaches you to be burning calories all the time. And so long term, you may not be burning as many calories in a weightlifting session as you would be if you're running on a treadmill, but you're going to increase your metabolic rate, which means you're going to be burning more calories all the time anyway. And so I definitely recommend that people incorporate some type of safe but effective strength training with what they're doing. Outside of that, I really love that people do what you said, which is move in whatever ways that they can at low intensity. So walking is a great example. I think walking is one of the healthiest things that most people can do. It's a low intensity. It promotes fat burning as the energy source. You're not burning an excessive amount of calories. You're just being active and getting hopefully a lot of other benefits like sun exposure and fresh light and lots of different colors and blue light exposure during the day. And again, sunshine and all that stuff. So that's kind of the way I think about it as far as that goes.
So you don't necessarily recommend like a calorie deficit for weight loss versus a calorie surplus for building muscle, because that's hard for somebody like me. Like I said, I'm 51. I do still have 7 pounds to get to my goal. And like, I don't know what to do because I want to build muscle because I know that that's best for me. And as I age, I'm losing muscle. But I also want to lose this few pounds. So do I just settle for the 7 pounds, stop there, and start building muscle and eating a little bit of a surplus? Like, what would you recommend for that? Because I know there are a lot of women, Courtney Luna is one of them. Like, she called it like being in the messy middle. Like, you're kind of in the middle. You're not really in like extreme weight loss mode anymore, but you're also not where you want to be. And so like, I love that phrase, being in the messy middle. Like, and I feel like that's where I am, like just 7 pounds left. And I'm not really so much worried about the weight. I want my clothes to fit a little bit better than they do. So what do you recommend? What's the best way for me to do that? Do I stay in a calorie deficit, keep doing what I'm doing? Or do I raise my calories up and lift weights and hope that I build muscle to replace some of the fat?
Great question. Hopefully you can do both at the same time. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I do think that calories matter. I think there's a lot of caveats there. And I think even tracking calories just by the nature of what it is can be a little bit problematic and difficult. That's not to say that that calories don't matter. I think they do. I'm going to steal this from, have you met Jake Thomas in the carnivore
Yes.
space? Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to steal something that he told me in a conversation we had a few weeks ago where he said, calories are your calories are your weight. So the number of calories you eat is how much you weigh. Your macronutrients is how you appear, and your micronutrients are how you feel. I thought that was an interesting way to think of things. It's like, yeah, if you want to lose weight, you probably need to be in some type of a caloric deficit. Everybody's a little bit different as far as the fat to protein ratio they need. And you know, I know you've played around with that quite a bit, which is great. Some people need more fat. Other people can get by with less fat. Regardless of where you are as far as your needs for fat intake, I think it's important to be focusing on protein as a macronutrient because your body doesn't necessarily use that as much for an energy source, and it can be used to help build up muscle. I do think you can do all of that and do some safe and effective strength training and be in a caloric deficit and recomposition your body at the same time. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. Another technique I like to give people is even if you're eating the same amount of calories, trying to do some type of time restriction where you're eating your calories in a smaller window and you know, going without food for a longer period of time, I find for most people to work quite well. I think that can be overdone. You need to be paying attention for, you know, the classic signs of over fasting, under eating, which means like if you're feeling like you're starting to feel cold, especially hands and feet, temperature wise, that's a really good indication that your body is kind of slowing its metabolic rate down and you need to add more calories or another meal. But if weight loss is the goal, I find it to be quite helpful to, you know, even doing, you know, similar kind of caloric deficit, but just crunch in the calories to a smaller time frame. I think anything within like 24 hours is perfectly safe for most people. Those are things I would try. It's never just as simple as let's do this and this is the next step. You're always trying to work with people and workshop things and see what people are willing to do. I also, how do I say that? I think that on social media, we also are exposed to influencers and people in the fitness space that look like they're ready to get their photos taken all the time. And they're taking these pictures that the lighting is perfect and they're incredibly lean and really fit. And it seems like they look that way all the time. And so I think we also hold up these standards of like, we think we need to look this certain way when it's like, we might be carrying a little bit more body fat than we would want, but we are also perfectly healthy and have so many other benefits. And we get so caught up in like, we want to look like an underwear model when really like it's a huge win that we're not all, you know, morbidly obese dealing with chronic disease. So I don't know. I don't think that's an excuse to, you know, not try to get to the body composition that you want, but it's also giving yourself a little bit of patience and grace while you're getting there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned macronutrients. And so you don't really have a recommendation for that, like a percentage of fat versus protein. You just kind of let people kind of figure that out on their own.
Yeah, again, it's kind of a workshopping thing and just trying to tweak things here and there and see what works. It is just so different what people do well on and what people tolerate on. And I wish I had a better answer that, you know, was kind of like everybody needs this and my job would be so much easier if I had that. But I've not found anything like that that works with everybody. So I do think people need to be willing to kind of experiment, go through, try different things, see what works, and understand that even the things that are working today, there's no guarantee that that same thing is going to work in a week, a month, or a year. So, you know, being open and flexible to that kind of thing, I think could be quite helpful. But yeah, again, frustrating sounds like a cop-out answer, but yeah, it's very, very tough to determine.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people recommending like 1 gram of both protein and fat per pound of ideal body weight or lean body mass. Do you think that's a good place for people to start? And then you can kind of mess with it?
I think that's a really fine place for people to start. Yeah, I think that would at least get you in the ballpark and you can make adjustments from there, whether you want to increase protein, maybe get a little bit less protein. One interesting caveat, I do use that as far as a recommendation for protein. I know that most people are probably not even in that ballpark and you just would be better served to get a little bit more. But one interesting caveat is I noticed that people, if they are doing any type of like time restricted eating, their protein intake by the nature of what they're doing is not going to be nearly as high. but I check people's weight and body fat and muscle mass using a body fat scale and a body composition scale all the time. And I know that even if somebody's under eating protein, but they are doing some type of time restricted eating, they don't lose muscle mass. I've seen it over and over and over again on body composition scales. And everybody says, if you're fasting, you're going to be taking your energy from protein and that's your muscle mass. And so you're going to lose muscle mass. I understand why they say that, but I don't actually physically see that when somebody's doing time restricted eating. Even if they're not getting what I would consider like a sufficient amount of protein. And my theory about that is that the body, when it's in that state, is using autophagy and is recycling different proteins. And so the need of exogenous protein, or the protein that you eat, seems to be like a little bit less in that state. So that is something that I've noticed. And again, I've literally tested so many people that they do not lose muscle when they do that, even if they're not getting what I would consider an adequate amount of protein. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And again, so many people say, your ideal body weight and protein. And for me, if I do that and still want to remain in a calorie deficit to lose the last few pounds or whatever, for me, that puts my protein at more like 40 or 45% of my calories for the day. If I'm getting the rest from fat and I'm trying to stick with between 16 and 1700 calories, that puts my protein, what seems to me like almost an unhealthy high level because of rabbit starvation. Like I don't want things to start going wrong that are going so well for me on carnivore. So that does worry me a little bit. If I'm in a calorie deficit, my protein has to be a lot higher, I think, than I kind of feel comfortable with. But I see a lot of people have great results with their protein being like 40 or 45%.
It's a high percent. And you're right. There is a bit of concern there that is a little bit much and people are not getting fat. One clue that I'll give people is like, see if you can drop your fat a little bit, see if you can have a little bit more protein, but be paying attention for things like your energy. Like if I do too much protein, like in the summertime is a good example. I don't typically crave, lean meat. I don't typically crave things like chicken, but for whatever reason in the summertime, it sounds a little better to me. So every week I might grill up like a big batch of, marinated chicken breasts or something. And, if they're, good and cooked right and juicy, they're not like overly dry, and I'll have them. But if it's like the day before a hockey game, for example, and I just eat mostly lean protein, I feel really flat. I don't feel like I've got good energy. I feel kind of down in the dumps and I'm not able to push myself as much. Whereas if I have, fatty red meat the day before, I know my fat ratio is going to be higher. My protein might be a little bit lower, but I feel really, really good. I feel warm and energetic, and I can really push myself in those more intense workouts. And so that's the kind of line I would tell people to ride is like, can you lose fat by dropping your fat a little bit lower? I think probably for a lot of people, but then balance that with like, okay, how am I feeling? If I start to feel crappy, I feel flat, I'm feeling like I'm losing some of the benefits I gained through carnivore, I would say to try to bring the fat back up a little bit and then be maybe a little bit more patient with the body composition kind of goal over time. Again, I think that's a tough thing for people to reconcile, but that might be one clue to say like, okay, let me play with my fat to protein ratio, see how I feel, and make adjustments as I go.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Casey, I think we touched on almost everything I wanted to touch on today. Thank you so much for being here. Your advice is just so great all the time. It's spot on.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's always such a joy to chat with you.
So much fun. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Carnivore Revolution.